Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here with you. Glad that you could be with me here on the Oasis. And as always, I wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Here in upstate New York, we have some very frigid temperatures, only about either 0 or 1 degree here today. By the weekend, today is Monday. No, today is Tuesday. January the 11th. Tuesday, January the 11th. And by the weekend, it's supposed to be down below 0. So, wherever you are and you enjoy your warm weather, well, okay, you just enjoy it. For me, I still find beauty in the snow, even in the cold. And yesterday, driving around, because Sunday, for those of you who are with me on the sermons, I was in this place right here, my side room, guest room, doing my message for Sunday because we were closed down. It was just a glaze, about a 1/4 inch of ice over everything. And even in that, I had to go someplace yesterday, so I didn't get the video up. And I don't know, just something about seeing all these trees and bushes and everything with this glaze on it. There's a type of beauty that can't be fully appreciated when you're stuck out in it in the outside, but beauty nonetheless. All right. I want to welcome all the new subscribers. We're getting more subscribers each week. And for your sake, let me continue to do this during the introduction of my teachings to exhort you to stay with me for 20 minutes. I try to keep these teachings to 20 minutes. And, to watch every day if it's at all possible. And if not, then as much as you possibly can. Notch out 20 minutes every day for this broadcast, because this is not, as I repeat myself a lot, those of you who've been with me, but for the new people, these are not little hacks. I don't give 15 different things. It's not a buffet. It's a type of teaching, well, not type, it's a teaching that is very dependent on you hearing the whole message, 20 minutes, and also being with me every day or as much as possible, because there are little tiny increments in those 20 minutes. You're not getting, honestly, you're not really getting a whole lot. But you add them all up, week after week and month after month, and then if you recall and you remember what's been said and what you've been taught, it's going to make a difference. Now, many of you have set for your goal for 2022 to, be done with these anxieties and depressions and so on. So that's the challenge, really, for all of you, is to make 2022 the year that you really conquer this thing. And hopefully this broadcast will help you. All right. Let me just begin today by saying that someone has asked the difference between depression and anxiety. First of all, these subjects can be complex. Depression can be interviewed. Depression can be studied and then explained where it's a bit complex, and it can have complex components. Anxiety as well. But here on the Oasis, things are done in a simple manner, which in the end, if you ever studied logic, is what is known as Occam's razor, meaning that usually the simplest answer or simplest definition is either the right one or the best. So if you're not familiar with these terms, Occam's razor is what we use here. We don't try to get into the complexities of what causes depression and all that's involved with it, or anxiety, panic attacks, and all that. We do go through the physiology, but not to the extent where it's just a lot of superfluous information. You can get that information if you want on your own in books. Okay, so first of all, depression is, in my mind at least, very easy to describe. It's a depressed spirit. Your spirit is depressed. I've often, from my observation in dealing with people, you'll see with depression a rather severe form of discouragement. Not your ordinary just having a bad day. It's the accumulation of many, many well, I'll say weeks, I'll start with weeks, months, in most cases years, or many cases years of things building up so that you're so severely discouraged from life, either because you're depressed, but from my point of view, it is the discouragement that is coming with these issues and problems, and in our case here, which we deal with on the Oasis, the symptoms that you experience. So depression is really a very severe form of discouragement. It's also, obviously, for those of you who have it or have had it, the symptoms of the fatigue, the muscles feel heavy, which, by the way, that doesn't mean that they actually are fatigued. They just feel that way. We have covered that before, which, again, brings me to this point. Stay with me as much as possible. Stay with me for the whole broadcast. Don't say, oh, this is boring. This isn't helping. Because you're not. Trust me, I've worked with enough people and have seen these things be very successful with people, but you're going to have to be patient and stick with me through the teaching and watch the show every day and until you've actually conquered and made progress. Okay, so back to depression. It's a real severe form of discouragement, an extraordinary form of discouragement, which may have arrived from your symptoms, or it may have arrived because of problems which then produce symptoms. The fatigue that I just mentioned is a feeling of fatigue. It's not a real fatigue. Go out run a marathon, and when you're done, ordinarily, you're going to feel fatigued, if not that day, certainly the next or the day after, and your body needs recovery. That's real fatigue. The fatigue that comes from the feeling, the physiological feeling associated with depression is combated, as you know, who've been with me for a while, by going out and taking that walk, going around the house and cleaning things up, forcing yourself, as we often hear, to go to work and to do things, to take the shower, because the feeling of fatigue is not the same thing as a real fatigue. Anxiety, in my view, is also fairly easy to understand. You're tense. You're, well, obviously you're fearful of something. Sometimes it's just the unknown. You don't know why you're so nervous, and we have gone through this many times, but briefly, for the sake of new subscribers, tension in the large skeletal muscles puts pressure on the nerves that innervate them, all right? Pressure on the nervous system. And once you have that, and you have pressure over a period of time, and you have it usually it's something we say, you know, it comes out of the blue. Ordinarily, it doesn't. It's been building up, and you didn't recognize it. You didn't notice it. Then all of a sudden, these scary symptoms come. Anxiety is just a feeling of agitation, of frustration, and obviously of fear. So that's as far as I think that we should go on this broadcast, trying to define the two. But I think that they're pretty easy to discriminate, to understand, because, and the question was proposed because I often have mentioned that, or I have mentioned that often depression, you always find a component of anxiety. Anxiety, you'll find a component of depression. They usually kind of go hand in hand. When you're depressed, you're not really recognizing the fact that you're anxious. And when you're anxious, you may not be recognizing the fact that you're depressed. Anyway, if you're interested in more of that, you could just do some reading on your own and see what you come up with. Lots of information, lots of studies done on these things. Here, we implement Occam's razor. We stay with the simplest definitions that we can work with and the simplest solution to them, which I'm telling you by way of a testimony. I've seen this work over many decades, and they do work. Okay. What I want to bring to you today is this truth. Your symptoms, whether it's depression or it's anxiety, can definitely make you feel helpless. You're there, everything's going fine. So I'll use the phrase that we hear so often, or sometimes we use, just, I have a blue sky. I mean, like a bolt from the blue. It's just out of nowhere, these symptoms come, and they often do. And when they do, you feel helpless. But the feeling of helplessness does not mean that you are hopeless. Now here's the kind of the trick. Because you feel helpless against your symptoms, then you begin to think, I'm hopeless, or this case is hopeless. Here's a little bit of wisdom for you as well. Whenever you're sick, you feel like you'll never get better. And when you are not sick, you feel as though you'll never get sick. Now, we don't think about it consciously this way, but that's how it is. Everything's great, feeling great. Then you have something that comes along and you get sick, even a little sick, and all of a sudden you're just miserable. And that's human nature. We tend to think in terms of extremes. People with nervous symptoms have a kind of infatuation with talking in extremes. Remember I mentioned to you a few weeks back, many people say, oh, I got a headache. And then some may have, I got a splitting headache. Okay, so we have an adjective. People with nervous symptoms, like yourself, you may go on to this, I got this crushing, killing, unbelievable headache. And when you use language like that, in the glib fashion, it makes the situation worse. In other words, it makes you even more tense. I got this splitting, aching, unbelievable. And I counted you to say, just say simply, I got a headache, or my stomach hurts. I'm feeling tired. You don't have to go through the drama, because that kind of romantic or sentimental view or expression makes you feel more tense. And language, when used in a glib fashion, has a tendency to be defeatist. I'm never going to get better. This is never going to go away. I also exhorted those of you who've been decades into depression and anxiety. Now you have this helplessness, hopelessness. So Pastor Ray, this is fine for some people that just developed symptoms in the last few years. They don't know what it's like. Well, one thing I can tell you is that the man talking behind this camera, I know what it's like. And I've worked with many, many people who know what it's like. So you're not the only one. You do not want to make your helplessness against your symptoms become a condition of the mind where you feel hopeless. Because you're not hopeless, and your case is not hopeless. Now, we know that there are cases in medicine, health, that as far as doctors are concerned, are registered as a hopeless case. What that ordinarily means, without perhaps it being a conscious thought or discursive thought, is the fact that there's nothing more that men can do. There's nothing more that modern medicine knows. There's nothing more in the textbooks. But with God, always remember this, with God, nothing is impossible. Nothing means nothing. There's nothing impossible with God because He's God. Okay, so we recognize that there are cases that are very bad. I don't mean mental, anxiety, depression as much as I mean, there's a cancer throughout the body and signs are not good and all of that. Okay, we recognize that. There's always God. I've seen God do things. I've seen the impossible cases turned around in my own ministry. That's for another time, another story. Or stories, plural. But when it comes to general anxiety and general depression, or even, rather acute anxiety or acute depression, because you feel helpless against the symptoms that just sort of attack you, which is not really an attack, but that's how we look at it. Like your heart, you don't have a heart that attacks you. And you say, oh, I had a heart attack. Well, it's a misnomer, but we use it and it communicates. These symptoms that attack you do make you feel helpless. The problem is that when you start to concede and then to the symptoms, and then you start, I don't want to go there today, or I'm not going to go out, or you go without me and I'll stay home. And all of that, it begins to make the situation to that degree that much worse. If you don't walk right into it, go right into the store, just go right into it, then it's going to begin to dominate your life. And there are many of you that are watching that your symptoms have done just that. They have dominated you for the last few months. Others, it's been for the last few years. And then there's still others, some of whom I know personally. This has been most of your life. You've been dominated by depression, anxiety, mental health disorders, whatever the diagnosis may be. We're trying to make the year 2022 in one way of speaking, we're trying to make the year 2022 where you break out from that feeling of hopelessness to realizing, no, I'm not. There is hope for me. And that means that there's hope that this condition of yours, it's an anxiety, it's a panic disorder, it's anxiety disorder, it's depression, and on and on and on through hundreds of various diagnoses and nuances and shades of meaning within diagnoses, that there is hope that you can overcome them and do it within the space of this year. I want to just say this because I'm trying to say, watch the show, stay with me for 20 minutes. It's not a lot of time, and so on, and watch as much as possible. Every day is best. But I'm not selling anything. I'm not being monetized. I'm not looking to break YouTube records for the most subscribers, because if that were the case, I'm pretty far behind. No, not at all. I do these broadcasts for one reason. That's to help you. That's it. My only motive, it's my only goal. We gain 1,000, 150,000, 1 million subscribers, fine. That's all the more people that I can help. But that's not my goal. My goal is to help those of you who actually tune in or go to the channel when you see a notification and watch it. So that being said, 2022 is the year where you break out of the mentality of hopelessness and say, I am not hopeless. I read of cases, and I've seen cases as well, doctors say, you'll never walk again. And the guy goes on to perform feats of strength or runs a marathon. You know these stories too. But the problem is that you say, well, yeah, that was great for him, and I wish I could be like him. Don't wish you could be like him. Don't wish you could be like the people I've talked about that I worked with personally. A woman of which had schizophrenia for 33 years, all the classic symptoms. And after we worked for a couple of years together in a group, all of her symptoms disappeared. Now that's impossible. That's impossible. No, it's impossible with men, not with God, not with God's teaching. So basically I want to communicate just the one thought to you today, and I want you to accept it. I want you to say it to yourself until you actually really believe it. Say, because I'm helpless, that does not mean I'm hopeless. It does not mean my condition cannot be cured by the grace and power and mercy of Almighty God. Say that until you believe it. You've been helpless now for weeks, for months, for years, decades. And now we want to put an end to this. And you want to put an end to this, right? But if you slip into that hopelessness syndrome, then you stop trying. And that's not good. Because if you stop trying, you just lose by default. Because you're no longer trying. Let's trust God together that through these teachings and our mutual prayers, one for another. By the way, share these broadcasts with anybody you think it can help. Oh, with the one caveat, if they want looking for one broadcast and they're waiting 5 minutes into the broadcast for something really dramatic, tell them don't bother. It's not going to help them. You got to be in this all the way, okay? But yeah, share it with someone that you think it can help. Say, check this pastor out, and especially if it's helped you. But let's make 2022 the year that you break free, and we got to start with the idea, the truth, that because you're helpless does not mean by any means that you're hopeless. Rather, the reverse is true. There is hope. No matter how long you've been suffering, there is hope that you can still beat this. And by God's power and God's grace, His mercy, and through prayer, we're going to believe that that is exactly what's going to happen. So let me pray for you. Father, I pray for my friends once again. I ask you to touch them and help them to overcome their symptoms of anxiety, depression, or whatever else it is that ails them, and touch them today and give them the peace of Christ. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hey, thanks for being with me. Again, share this with people if you think it could help them, or just give them an opportunity to watch. If you're just auditing, you want to subscribe, please do. Nice small group that we have. And obviously hit the notification button. I appreciate the thumbs up if you're getting something out of these teachings. And if you have comments or questions, just put them down below. Or email me at tft@timefortruth.com. tft@timefortruth.com. And I'll do my best to get back to you and help, provide you with some answers. All right. God willing, I'll be with you here again tomorrow on the Oasis. And until that time, I truly pray that you have the peace of Christ. Until then, God bless. See you tomorrow.